Signore e signori, buonasera. Benvenuti. Welcome to New York University, Casa Italiana, Zerilli-Marimò. My name is Stefano Albertini. I'm the director of the Casa, and we really wanted to have this evening to celebrate the life, the career, and the magic that Renata Scotto created throughout the world, but especially in this city. And I'm going to leave to our fantastic panel the pleasure to talk about Madame Scotto. I just have one memory that I would like to share with you. The first time I met her, she introduced herself simply by saying, "Sono la mamma di Filippo. I am Filippo's mother." Filippo is here in the front row, and at that time he was a student of mine. So I found so sweet that she didn't use her name, but she told me, "Sono la mamma di Filippo. I'm a mother, I'm Filippo's mother." And Filippo is here in the front row, but tonight with Fred there is going to be Laura Anselmi, who is the daughter of Renata Scotto, Claudia Catania, mezzo-soprano and colleague of Renata, Robert Lombardo, an artist manager, and Harvey Sachs, a music historian. They're going to be all on the stage. And when I said the magic and the legend around Renata Scotto, I said that when somebody is a great singer, it's already a lot. But when it's a legend, it's a different thing. And one evening, Fred took me to see this comic performance, a sort of impersonation. And it was at Symphony Space, and it was an evening with Madame Vera Gallup-Borch. I don't know how many of you have seen it. And of course, it was a mockery, but also very intelligently done, with most of the jokes that can be understood only by people like Fred, who know everything about opera. And at the end of the performance, the performer said, 80% of what I am, I owe it to Renata Scotto. When you are so able to enter into the collective imagination that even comedians take you as an example that sort of symbolizes and stands for everything that musica lirica, that opera stands for, I think that's where the legend begins. So without further ado, I'm asking you to please welcome Fred Plotkin and his guests, Laura Anselmi, Claudia Catania, Robert Lombardo, and Harvey Sachs. Thank you.
Well, good evening and welcome. Normally, I introduce one guest. To me, tonight, the guest is actually Renata Scotto. And we lost her a few months ago. She is still very much with us. And I had the great pleasure of knowing her and working with her. And I spoke to all of our guests tonight, and they each knew a different Renata. It was the same person, but she was a diamond. She was faceted. She was prismatic. And you turn the diamond a little bit, and you get a different glow and a different reflection. So tonight, what we're going to do is talk about the Renata Scottos that we knew. And I picked some music, and I asked some of our guests to pick music as well, so that you will come to know this person we knew and very much loved. So I'm going to get right to it. The briefest of biographical information. She was born in Savona, which is Liguria, the Italian Riviera, February 24th, 1934, and she died in Savona on August 16th of 2023. Her father was a police officer, her mother a seamstress. During World War II, her mother took her and her sister to the mountains to avoid bombings and attacks on Savona, which was and is a strategic port. If you go along the Italian Riviera, the big ports were La Spezia, in the past Recco, Genova, and Savona. And Savona right now, and for many years, has been the port of Switzerland. So it has a very particular relationship with Switzerland. At age 12, in 1946, she went to her first opera, Rigoletto, starring Tito Gobi, who was my teacher. And he said to me, "You need to know Renata Scotto," and that's how I met her. She decided at the age of 12 that she would become a singer. She was determined as she was talented, and turned her attention towards studying in Milan. And Julian, set up number one, please. Remarkably, she made her opera debut at the age of 18 in Savona on December 24th, on Christmas Eve of 1952, as Violetta in La Traviata. The next night, she sang Violetta again at the Teatro Nuovo in Milan. So, Julian, if you would, please play number one and then number two.
December 24th, 1952, made your debut as Violetta as a baby. As a baby, she was a baby Violetta. And then the next night, Christmas Day, she was a teenager. As the next day, you made your Milan debut at the Teatro Nuovo, again as Violetta. So for one thing, singing Violetta 2 nights in a row, where did you learn the role of Violetta?
I had a coach.
In Savona?
In Savona. No, actually in Milan.
In Milan.
In Milan, because in Savona, I left Savona 4 years before I made my debut.
Okay.
I went to Milan to study. And my coach, my piano teacher, and my school, in a convent with nuns, and I was studying.
So if you went to Milan at the age of 14?
Actually, yes, 13.
13. So did your parents come with you, or
no,
you lived with the nuns?
That's why I went in a convent.
All right. And when did you come out of the convent?
I came out at 20. And I remember I was studying Traviata, and the nun said, no. You cannot sing this opera because it's not a good girl.
Yeah.
I said, but it's not my fault. It's Giuseppe Verdi that wants to. So I sang Traviata, but against the nuns'
The nuns' wishes.
She was a very good teacher because she knew exactly. I always sang, and I teach myself today the same kind of technique. You know, there are. If we talk about technique, it's not only one. You can adjust technique to technique, but for sure, the most important is the breathing. And before Leopard, I didn't know how to breathe. Singing, yes, by nature. You know, nature gave me this beautiful voice. But once you know how to breathe, you also know how to support the sound, and the sound goes into your head. I mean, this is technique. If you want to learn singing, come over and we have a lesson. Now,
could you say briefly, how do you breathe when you're a singer?
The diaphragm is here, so this is the part that you fill up. You never breathe. To sing, you never breathe. You know, usually you say, I take a lot of air by doing, but here it doesn't go too well.
Well, this is a very clinical question, but maybe you can answer. I always wonder from
I'm not
singers,
a doctor, so.
Where do you put the air? Where when you're putting it down
you
there?
Put it here.
Okay, but in the stomach, in the back, in the
stomach and the back, diaphragm.
All right.
It's different to women and men, but we have to call our Professor Fussi from Padova to explain exactly how it happened, because we should also see it on the video. But for sure, when you breathe, you don't even see the breathing. But here, a large. They see that the singers are all a little big here, and they have a big breast and a big here, because they fill up with air. And once you have all this full, then the sound comes. I don't sing. Don't expect me to sing. But the sound open and goes support here, and slowly this goes small.
Yeah.
Because the sound goes up here, and from here it goes. It's a little bit.
All right. No, it's.
I need a singer. You come over.
If you want.
Right now? Oh, we don't have a piano. No, it's a little more simple to do it and difficult to complicate to say.
To explain.
So, Julian, set up number 3, please. So, Renata auditioned for the role of Walter in Catalani's La Vallee and was selected by conductor Victor de Savata. The opera opened the La Scala season on December 7th, 1953. The stars of the opera were Renata Tebaldi, the other Renata, Mario Del Monaco, but most applause and acclaim went to Renata Scotto. And she turned down after that supporting parts in Milan at La Scala, opting to sing leading lady roles in other cities, including Rome and Venice. And you heard her talk about her teacher, Mercedes Llopart. She got this teacher through Alfredo Kraus. And Llopart was a leading soprano, singing a lot of dramatic stuff. She sang with Toscanini, Harvey, Mr. Sachs, Professor Sachs at the end. Anything you ever need to know about Arturo Toscanini and family, this is the guy to work with. Did you ever find anything about her and Toscanini, Mercedes Llopart?
Yes, I know that.
Yeah.
I know that that Llopart worked with Toscanini in the 20s. In the 1920s, she was one of the important singers at La Scala.
And Llopart retired in 1945, but stayed in Milan even though she was in Barcelona, and became one of the leading teachers and took on the young Renata Scotto. And now we're going to watch number 3, where Renata told me about her days at La Scala. So, Julian, if you please.
Ambiente, in the environment of Milan in the 1950s, there was Visconti, there was Zeffirelli, there was Gavazzini, there
was a La Scala.
La Scala. This was one of the most important places in the world for opera culture, not just opera. There was an audience that knew opera sometimes. But
no, the audience knew,
They knew what they liked.
They know what they, maybe by ear or there are some, okay.
So growing up and living,
loves music.
Living in that environment, what did you absorb from all of these creativi, these creative people around you?
Enthusiasm I was born with. And for me, there was only desire and to go on stage and to sing. I mean, I was 4 years old and my mother would put me on the table and with zia, cugina, sing a song. And I would sing. Just the fact that I was on the table, for me, the table was a stage. And enthusiasm. Of course, I was in Milan, and I wanted to go to La Scala because my desire was to sing at La Scala. My God. You know, for a 16 years old girl in Milan to sing at La Scala, it's really a dream. But for me, it was a desire, not a dream. Because I always said, I have to sing in this theater. I have to. So I didn't have money. No money. Very little money. And my piano teacher said, Renata, I give you my tessera. Come si dice la tessera?
Your entrance card.
Amma?
Sort of an entrance card or a pass.
Entrance card, a pass. Let's say a pass, yes. So a pass, I give you my pass and you go Sunday afternoon from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock. If there was a Wagner opera, I could never go to the last act because the nuns, 2 to 5 only. But I went to La Scala without paying, up in Loggione, and running for the 5 story, I think. 5 story. running to get the best place up there in Logione and to listen to opera. And I said, oh, maybe one day I'll be here. But who were the singers?
Yeah.
The singers were Elisabeth Schwarzkopf. So I heard a lot of her because I don't know, every Sunday Elisabeth Schwarzkopf was singing. Rosenkavalier, I don't know how many times I heard Rosenkavalier. E Bestignani,
Wow.
mezzo-soprano, great mezzo-soprano. And guess, Callas.
Sure.
Callas, and I will never forget, Gioconda and Norma, I heard from Callas up there. And Del Monaco, many times then after I sang with him. But great singer, the greatest, Elena Nicolai, great singers, a great conductor. My God, Furtwängler, all the greatest conductor, they were there. And this was my not dream, my wish that one day I would be there and have the same opportunity.
But then, like Cinderella, La Cenerentola, you had to go
Then I
back
had to
the
run.
nuns to be back before the door closes.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, Julian, please set up number 4. In 1957, Renata joined the La Scala company and sang more leading roles such as Adina in Elisir d'Amore and Norina in Don Pasquale. And Claudia Catania, you sang with Renata at the Met, and we're going to talk more about that later. But I asked Claudia and Bob Lombardo to give examples that they thought represented Renata's singing and her stage presence well. And one of the ones that you chose was a very early performance from Elisir d'Amore. Why was that?
The sheer beauty.
Microphone.
Wow. The sheer beauty of the sound was extraordinary for me. And also, there was a way that she had of standing naked in the world with just the voice. The voice was so pure and magnificent. I had never heard this excerpt, and I found it when you said to look. I found it. It was from the 1960s.
60,
am I right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just for the sheer beauty of the voice. Yeah.
So, as you all watch this, I asked Julian, my wonderful engineer and my co-collaborator in all of these adventures, to keep in all the applause that followed. Because what Renata does here is something brilliant that when I work with young artists and they say, what do I do when they're applauding? I said, number one, don't complain. But number two, there are ways to encourage, to discourage, to bring it along, to react without speaking. Leontine Price was magnificent at this. And there were a few artists, Tatiana Troyanos, another, and Renata. So I want you to watch because this is very early in her career and she already understood exactly what to do. So Julian, if you please, Prendi per me se libero from Elisir d'Amore by Donizetti.
Cristo
Claudia, talk about why that was beautiful singing.
The microphone.
You know, as I think about Renata, and I've been thinking about her for days now because of this, she had a risk to her art that that singers don't have today, that very few singers had then. The risk of when nothing is there but her and the note, and she stays with it and takes it. That kind of, I don't know, in that particular excerpt, that's what makes it beautiful for me. Part of the beauty is that she was such a risk taker, but with a planned risk. She knew what it was going to be. She knew how to craft the tone, and then just stay there. There's just her and the tone, and there's nothing else.
Talk about risk. At the Edinburgh Festival in August of 1957, so in other words, very soon after Renata became a principal player at La Scala, Maria Callas was appearing as Amina in Bellini's La Sonnambula. Now, this was a very famous production that Luchino Visconti directed. And for many people that I know in Milan, when I worked in Milan, they would say that was Callas's greatest role. We could talk about that endlessly, but for many people, the Luchino Visconti production with Maria Callas as La Sonnambula was her greatest. And she was scheduled to do 4 performances in Edinburgh. They all sold out, and the Scots added another performance, assuming that she would sing, and she said, "I'm not going to sing it." She left, and they didn't know anyone who could come and do Amina 2 days later, and they summoned Renata Scotto, who did not know the role. And she went to Scotland, she learned it in 2 or 3 days, sang Amina on September 3rd, 1957, making her international debut, and became a worldwide star as a result of that at the age of 23, 1957. Bob, when were you first aware of Scotto? Number one, in terms of as an artist, but then hearing her, meeting her, working with her?
Well, in 1962, I was taking a junior year abroad, and I was studying at the University of Florence, and of course, my passion, opera. I had also read before I went to Europe that year that at La Scala they were doing a production of a fabled opera that had not been performed in the second half of the 20th century, and that was Meyerbeer's Les Huguenots. So, of course, I made it my business to make sure I got a ticket to hear one of those performances. And on the few days that I was in Milan, I also magicked out and heard Callas in Medea. And in the middle of it all, I heard a performance of Rigoletto and the voice of Renata Scotto, which changed my life. When I heard her first entrance in Rigoletto, and I was up in the Loggione, hanging there, I think I had an out-of-body experience because the sound came right to me. And I heard this crystalline, beautiful, pure tone, expression telling me who Gilda is. And I understood Gilda immediately from her first utterances when she sees her father. And then throughout the opera, I was absolutely mesmerized. So after the performance, I obviously, as the good opera fan would do, would go to the Via Filodrammatici and wait outside the stage door, along with many, many others. And I did get her autograph, and we exchanged a few words. And I told her I live in New York, and she said, well, forse ci vedremo a New York. But I knew that she didn't have a definite plan at that time. But she was working on something, obviously, otherwise she wouldn't have said it. So after that, I had bit in the U.S. Army to serve, and then when I came out, I noticed that Renata Scotto was making her Met debut coming up as Butterfly, and that cinched it. It's hard for me to explain the impact that she had on my life, but also the impact of that first performance. What she said to me with her voice. You would understood immediately who is Cho-Cho-san, what is her story. And you never doubted it for 1 minute all night until that last end of the Piccolo deal. And that's how I became aware of Renata Scotto. And after that is a whole other story, which I won't go into now. But it was the determining experience of my lifetime in so many ways, but particularly in understanding the purity of singing, what singing tells the soul. And even though she would often say, I can't cry when I do Mimi's death scene, I can't cry when I do Cho-Cho-san. She has to make us cry, and she always.
Bob, I'm going to ask you you have a sort of unique position given your seniority, that you heard, I assume, Renata Tebaldi and Maria Callas, and therefore heard this artist, and hold your mic closer, please, who arrived on the scene 11 or 12 years younger than those other two ladies, and frankly attracted a whole new audience and perhaps drew certain aspects of both of those artists, but was not copying either Callas or Tebaldi. She became something else, in my opinion, but I heard Tebaldi late in her career. I heard Callas once early in my opera-going career, so I had no understanding of how great she was. But you heard those ladies and could talk about the three. Talk about, if you would, these three artists in New York, in Milan, their impact on the opera world, and how each had a special place.
Well, Tebaldi had also a special place in my heart. The sound of the voice and the beauty of tone and the sincerity of her singing certainly connected with me. And the first time I heard Tebaldi was in a recital, actually. And it happened that she was singing in a high school auditorium that was a 6-block walk from where I lived in New Jersey. And I fell in love because there was nothing not to love about Tebaldi. Callas, on the other hand, it was a different impact. I heard Callas sing Tosca, and I heard her sing Lucia, and I heard her sing Medea. And to me, again, it was the honoring of the word, the phrase, coloring the voice, and to me it was a visceral impact. When Callas delivered a phrase, you knew immediately, and that I think she shared with Renata. Renata, when she delivered a phrase, you knew exactly who the character was. When I heard Renata sing Mimi, it was in Naples, in a rather stunning production of Bohème, with a splendiferous cast, as I remember. When she got to Act 3 and Act 4, I don't think I ever heard better singing, but more communicative singing from anyone. It was just so personal. And you understood who Mimi was, what she'd been through. As I did the first time I heard her sing Mimi's first act aria, which there was you understood every aspect of Mimi, telling you what Puccini wrote in that music. You understood everything that was about her, because Renata never left anything untouched. I always called her the mistress of Le Piccole Cose. There wasn't a role she touched where you didn't know who that person was, what this person had experienced, and where she was going with this. The first time I heard her sing Don Carlo, the Tu che le vanità, it was something that I had not experienced from any other singer, not even Callas. You understood the tragedy of Elisabetta, but you also understood the woman, Elisabetta, and what she had been put through to that point. And just as at the end of Butterfly, and I would hear, va, gioca, gioca, the admonition to the child to play, but also don't forget your mother's face. And that's what I always got from her performances. Even listening to Bellini songs, Rossini songs, the Regata Veneziana, you got this whole trip through the Regata Veneziana, understanding every aspect of the characters. And it was one of the things that I always prized about her performances. They were so rich. You never went away disappointed at any level because it was a font that came through her. It was giving, but giving with a tremendous idea and a tremendous control. And but you never knew that. You never knew that as a listener. You would just be taken through it.
So, Julian, set up number 5, please. In 1960, Renata married Lorenzo Anselmi, a violinist, in the La Scala Orchestra. They were married more than 50 years, and they produced 2 wonderful children who are here tonight, Filippo and Laura. And that same year, Scotto made her American debut at the Lyric Opera of Chicago at the age of 27 as Mimi in La Boheme. And Bob provided a clip not from that production, but of Renata as Mimi in the first act, Mi chiamano Mimi. So if you please. Julian, set up number 6, please. Harvey Sachs, take the mic. By the way, I have tissues here. I brought them if we only... I knew tonight we had to come armed. I said about him before, there are not adjectives to describe Harvey's illustriousness as a musicologist and interpreter and explainer of this art form. And all the great artists were willing to talk to him. And Renata was interviewed by Harvey in what turned out to be her last interview. And Harvey has very gentilmente, very kindly brought a clip that I would like Julian, who is Harvey's son, to play. And,
Nepotism.
Pardon me? Another of your finest achievements. And then we're going to talk about what Renata said to Harvey. So, Julian, if you please.
You work a lot with him at the piano when you
talking
worked on
specifically
About James Levine, yes.
Always.
Yeah.
Always.
Specifically
But
about
we
his
loved
work
to
with Jimmy
work
Levine.
with piano and him.
Work.
Oh my God, we were joy.
Yeah, yeah.
And then stop immediately a moment and then talk about and then enjoy. Che bello.
Yeah.
I would like to go back with that period.
I'm sure.
With him.
Yes.
Not because of the period.
No,
because
I
of him.
understand. I understand.
Okay.
Because he worked very carefully on fraseggio, on...
Ma era together, sai?
Yeah.
Together because we had more or less the same ideas how to approach that moment in the opera, and we always work and talk about and do it.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastico.
Yeah. Yes, I know. I mean, I talked to him. He always mentioned you,
Yeah.
you know, and how
Very good friends.
yes, and how easy it was to work with you. He always
And
said.
like it was for me
Right.
with him.
Right.
Because you work with music, that's all.
Yeah.
Music.
Yeah.
And when you understand each other with music,
Yes.
the rest is doing.
Yeah.
What you would tell us was that he made you work harder than anybody else that you had worked with. He made you better, in other words.
Oh, that's
He made
different.
you
That's
better.
different. Yes. Yes, that's
I
true.
remember you telling us
But
that.
it was comune.
Right.
Yeah.
Io a lui, lui a me.
Yeah.
Sì, reciproco. un lavoro
Assolutamente,
reciproco.
yes. And that was a joy doing music with a person that you can talk about and
Yes.
and do it.
Yeah. Jimmy loved to talk. He loved to talk a lot.
Ma quando parla è
I'll
facile
translate.
che dica qualche cosa davvero
Sì.
bene,
Sì.
e specialmente quando è una cantante che lo capisce e che facciamo la stessa cosa,
Sì.
allora non c'è bisogno di parlare tanto.
No, infatti. Ma lui amava le voci, cioè ci sono molti direttori che non conoscono bene la voce, invece lui...
Lui ama molto la voce, certo.
Sì.
La mia.
Sì, questo
La mia voce.
va sans dire.
Renata, gli piaceva nominare il mio nome perché c'era la R.
Sì.
Va bene, caro maestro.
You sang with him for the first time in 1974.
Yes, and
And
I
the
was
last-
a little bit because I came from Los Angeles, I believe, or from and I didn't know about him. I knew about him, but I didn't know him.
Right.
So I said, oh my God.
Another
Adesso arriva
thing-
questo qua, comincia a parlare e io non ho voglia di sentire, voglio andare. Instead, he didn't want to talk and we just did music and we were happy.
And you were together.
Because you gave me,
Yeah.
he gave me and I gave him.
Yeah.
So we did really beautiful music and sometimes I said, you know what? I was not a good music at that moment. Tell me and let me do that again as you like. And then he would say, yes, and now you do it.
Right.
So, and we'll, fantastic. I would go back for that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Best moment.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you worked with him for 27 years at the Met.
solo.
74 to 2001.
Only.
Yeah. Yeah, only 27
Only.
years. Non c'è male.
Non c'è male, no. Magnifico.
Fantastic.
It was a joy.
Yeah.
Joy.
Yeah, I should preface by saying I'm kind of here by accident because of this interview. When Renata Scotto was really the reigning soprano here in New York, I was living in Europe. And I knew her mostly through recordings. But I was going to be in Italy this summer, and I'm collecting information for a project of my own about James Levine's work at the Met. And so I arranged with Laura, very kindly arranged for me to meet and talk to her mother. And that's how this conversation took place. This was recorded on my cell phone. It was never intended for public hearing. And we just put together some excerpts from it. I just wanted, for the part that was in Italian, just to translate for you, when I said that that Jimmy loved to talk, she said, when he talks, it's likely that he really says something, especially when you have a singer who understands him and that we do the same thing. Then there's no need to talk a lot. And I said he loved voices. I mean, there are many conductors who don't know voices well, but he, and she says, he really loved the voice. Mine. And then she imitates him saying, Renata, Renata. He loved to say my name because there was the rolled R, dear maestro. And then when I mentioned about the first time that she sang with him, she said that she was, as you heard, she was coming from, she said Los Angeles was actually San Francisco. Yes. And she said her thought was, now this guy is coming, he'll start to talk, and I don't feel like listening. I want to leave. But in fact, and she goes on to say in English, it was, they understood each other immediately. So that's my part of the...
Well, I have a question for you, Harvey. Yeah. I have many, of course, but many of you know I worked at the Met, and I had the very good fortune of having James Levine's ear on a lot of occasions. If I want to learn something, I think he recognized in me someone who actually may take what he taught me and transmit it and make the most of it for other people. And he spoke to me always very candidly about voices and voices he liked. Not about the ones he didn't, but the voices that he liked, he told me why he liked them. And the artist whom he liked, he would say why he liked them. And there were certain kinds of artists, with one of them being Renata, another Tatiana Troyanos, another Leonie Rieseneck, who I think another, he didn't say this, but I would add it as a category, Carol Vaness, who have a certain kind of imperative in their performance. When they're there for their characters, they're there for business. They mean business. They know what they're talking about. They're very deliberate. They're very open-hearted, all four of those artists. And would you, to the degree that you can, talk about Levine's relationship to voices and to singers and how he would find artistic chemistry with a particular artist, which is not to put down another one because he was always very encouraging, but those with whom he really found a certain kind of, the Italians say intesa, which goes beyond understanding to real deep connection.
Yes, that's absolutely true. I think he particularly appreciated intelligent singers. You know, there are singers with great voices who are not necessarily great interpreters of their roles. And he named a few of those as well, which I will not repeat. But I think he particularly enjoyed working with, among others, of course, Domingo. That was somebody he worked with, you know, a countless number of times. And in fact, in this conversation with Renata Scotto, she mentioned the recordings that they did together, and she said the three of us always worked well together because we went after the roles. We really wanted to, and when we would do extra takes, we would get into the roles even more. So yes, I mean, he was absolutely somebody who thought constantly about the sense that he was trying to communicate through the music, whether it was opera or symphonic music, for that matter. And Scotto was absolutely one of his very favorite artists, and you know, I think 17 different operas they worked on together, something like that. So it was a remarkable partnership.
Laura, at the same time that Renata Scotto was having this enormous international career, but focused primarily on Italy and New York, you and your brother Filippo grew up in this environment, but also, from what I know, your parents made sure that you both had a home life and a real life, let's say, as children. Talk about, number one, growing up in the context of, did you know that your mother was a big star, and was she a big star in the kitchen, or?
Well, it's interesting. As a child, what is around you is what you believe to be normal everyday life. I saw my mother working. I remember letters that I would write to her. Oh, you're coming back in 30 days. I'm going to give you hugs. But I didn't really, you know, I saw people in the house. They were taking care of the house. I didn't know the grandiosity of what she was doing at that time as a child. There was always music in the house. That was wonderful. Every room I'd go into, if my mother walked into it, she'd walk into it with notes, which was very interesting. And that was, you know, growing up in Italy first. We were very little. And then we moved to New York. Again, one day I was told I was moving to New York. That was normal. We moved a lot, and we lived on Park Avenue. I didn't know a word of English, neither did my brother. And we were put in school on 92nd Street. I didn't know a word of English, just that was normal, going to school and not knowing how to speak. Everything was just part of how we were raised. And then we moved from there, and as I got older, I started to understand and appreciate more. My Saturday night was going to the Met, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night. My brother and I would go to the backstage, enter through the back door, and spend the entire night in, playing chopsticks with Howard in the Camerino. And that was normal. And once in a while, we'd sit in the back and watch my mom sing. And that was, at that time, you know, you don't realize what's happening. You just take it, oh, this is what my mom does. This is what my life is like. As you get older, and I went to high school, I started to be more in tune of what my mom really did, and the music and the happiness and you know how I grew up and what I saw, and it was just, you know, what I take from it now is I wish that I had been older at that time to appreciate it more than I did when I was little.
Your parents were both Italian born and raised and grew up in the fascist era first and then the World War II, and there was a lot of privation, there was a lot of difficulty, and they worked very, very hard, and then they came to America, and you lived as American children, I would guess, but to what degree did they teach you about the Italy they knew about, well, obviously they taught you the language, but about Italian culture and about being Italians in addition to being New Yorkers?
A lot. I mean, we never broke our ties at all. I spent, as a matter of fact, the first few years, half the school was in New York and half the year was in Italy still. So our family was there. We always were speaking Italian in the house. Our babysitters were from Italy. And everybody around us always spoke, either English. We were learning the English language. We had American friends. We were learning the American way. But at home, we always kept the Italian culture, and we would travel to Italy a lot.
Who cooked?
Yeah. So my mom cooked and taught me to cook, and also the lady that would take care of the house, as I knew her, she would cook for us, and also my babysitters would cook. But my mom did teach me a good amount of dishes, which was always nice.
So, because your father was from Mantova and your mother from Liguria, these are very different culinary styles, completely.
And my father cooked a lot,
One
too.
of them is animal fat and butter fat and so on. The other is olive oil and magro, as Renata would say. And Renata, who was a woman of strong opinions, and I can be of strong opinions, too, about food, at least, and we would have, not rows, but we would have spirited discussions about the details of Ligurian cooking. And Renata hated garlic.
Yes.
Hated garlic. And, the few times when I would be in the kitchen and she would come in, she'd say, puzza di aglio. In other words, the stench of garlic. I said, ma non c'è aglio qua. I know that you don't like it. But it was her way of sort of setting the stage for a confrontation. Not a mean one, but a friendly battle, because in Italy, every single person, even if you live in the same town, in the same region, has their own interpretation of the same dish. So that she would immediately say, aglio qua, non mi piace. But she was a good cook. Apart from everything else she did, she was a very good cook. Did you know your her parents?
Yes. It's interesting you asked that, because we moved to New York, we did lose the closeness that you would have with the grandparent. My father's parents died younger, in their early 70s, I believe, right? And I didn't get to see them all that much. We would come back in the summer, spend our summer in our house in Gonzaga, and that's when I saw my father's parents. We weren't all too close, but when we were there in the summer, I made sure that we also would go see my mom's parents, which were in Savona. Mm-hmm. So we would spend at least 2 weeks there living with them, and so we were close, but only in the time when I would visit in Italy. So that was a little bit tough.
So 2 of Renata's most famous roles were as mothers. And we're going to explore those 2 roles. First, famously, Madame Butterfly. And Claudia was very frequently the Suzuki to Renata's Madame Butterfly. And they made a very memorable couple, and I saw them do it many times in the audience, in the wings, backstage, in the fly space above. I tried to sort of see both of you from every angle that I could in those older productions, because the impact was very different. But I never obviously got as close to her as you did on the stage. And therefore, please talk a little bit before we watch a scene, or hear a scene actually, about performing Suzuki with one of the most famous Madame Butterflies ever. And the 2 characters are so bonded. and I know it bonded you. And talk a little bit about going with Renata to see Jan Pierce. I know you wanted to talk about that.
I did want to tell
And
that.
talk about also working with Renata on the stage.
Before I did Suzuki with Renata, I covered it in Miami, and she was doing it. And I watched and watched and watched. I went to every rehearsal and every performance. So by the time we did it together, I kind of knew what she was going to do. She was very physical with Suzuki, very visceral. And what I remember that I want to share with you was the first time I did it with her was in Puerto Rico. And we had no rehearsal. And there's that moment before Un Bel Dì. And Un Bel Dì for her was a conversation with Suzuki. And we were on our knees together, and she was wrapped around me. And our cheeks were touching. And she sings that line, Rifaranidiata, and there's that high note. And her cheek was next to mine, and I could feel her vibrating. It was like she was vibrating next to me in that beautiful note. And I remember thinking this: if I never sing again, this moment was worth everything. She was incredible in that role. She had studied it with Asian people, including an Asian man. I had studied it with a retired geisha. And I knew when she said, "I will kill you," she meant it. And the tension on the stage was ferocious. And I never had that experience with anyone else. But I do want to tell this story. We were rehearsing at the Met, maybe Clemenza di Tito, and it was a Saturday. And when the rehearsal was over, I was going to get on a train and go to New Rochelle and spend the weekend with Jan Pierce and his wife, who were very close friends of mine. And she said, "Well, I live in Larchmont." She said, "I'll drive you to Larchmont. They can come and get you." Sounded great. We talked about food, and we talked about clothes, and we rode to Larchmont. I forgot that it was Shabbos. So I called Alice, and of course, she couldn't come to get me. She couldn't drive. So there we were in New Rochelle. We called taxis. We did whatever. And she said, "I'll take you." So we get in the car, and at this point, Jan Pierce had a series of strokes, and he was totally paralyzed except for two fingers, and he could tap with those two fingers. What I didn't know was that she had never met him. They had never sung together. We arrived, we went to the front door, Alice opened the door, and they introduced themselves to each other, and it was very sweet. And she noticed that he was sitting in a wheelchair in the back with an aide in the backyard. And she left us, and she made a beeline for him. And she got to him, and she took his head in her hands, and she told him who she was and how grateful she was to him for everything she learned about opera and about singing and about music from him. And his mind was perfectly fine, and he was tapping and tapping. And she let go, and she sat on the grass next to the chair, and she took his hands in hers, and she proceeded for the next hour to talk to him about his career, about her career, about the singers of his generation and the singers of her generation, and what the Met was like then and what the Met is like now. And it was extraordinary. And then she kissed him goodbye, and she left. And I thought to myself that for the hundreds of people who got to sing with Renata and who got to be with her on the stage, nobody got to see that side of her that was so tender and beautiful. So I wanted to tell you that. But I loved singing Butterfly with her. I loved it. Yeah.
Julian, please play number 7. It's audio. And then the duet. You know, Claudia, when you were talking about just now about James Levine and about Renata, you reminded me of something I forgot. I wish I had included in preparation for this evening, but I'll mention it briefly. I know opera, but an opera that I did not know was La Clemenza di Tito. Oh. And Levine stopped me in the hallway. His car was behind my office, so whenever he left the building, he would often stop by and say hello or goodbye, whatever, and then go out the door, and the car was parked right behind. And he came by one day and he said, you know, we're going to do an opera called La Clemenza di Tito, and I think it's going to change your life because I know you. And he said, so what I want to do is have you come to rehearsals and you watch Jean-Pierre Pinel work, the director, designer, and listen to the score. And he said, also, you're going to notice that Renata Scotto is going to be singing Mozart, which is something I had never heard. And he said, I just know that this knowing you, this opera will affect you deeply. It is now my favorite Mozart opera, by far, and an opera that I listen to all the time and teach a lot because it was that life-changing. And I forgot, frankly, that you were in that. Talk a bit about La Clemenza as an opera, that experience. Were you Agno?
Yes,
Yeah.
I was Agno. You know, the experience I had that changed my life was Idomeneo, rather than Clemenza di Tito, because it was, once again, it was Ponell. And anything, I was really lucky. I worked with James Levine, and I worked with Renata Scotto. And how many people can say that? And Ido Moneo really changed my life. But when everybody was talking before we came out, and Bob was telling about all the operatic experience he had had, and I had to say, you know, the experience I had with Renata was more personal, had a personal side to it. And I remember her saying, I'm in town now, because we were going to rehearse Clemenza di Tito. I'm in town now, so I can come to dinner. And I said, oh, good. When would you like to come? She said, tonight. And so I raced home from rehearsal and bought the chicken and threw out the garlic. And I remember I bought a bottle of Macon Village, and she had never had it. And she said, oh, this is the most delicious wine. She then took a shrimp that was about this big and gave it to my 3-pound dog, who forever loved Renata. But there were those moments. There was nothing like it. There was nothing like the Metropolitan Opera when James Levine was there and Renata Scotto was there. There was nothing like it. I feel so sorry for the kids of today that they don't get to have that. Yeah.
My favorite Renata Scotto role was Puccini's Suor Angelica. And when I asked Claudia and Bob, who worked with her and knew her, to send me some video clips or audio clips of stuff that they loved from Renata, the only role that all of us merged on was Puccini's Suor Angelica. My clip is different from Claudia's, as you will see, even though it's the same music. So I want to do with you something that I think will reveal Renata Scotto's artistry. Julian, we will be playing 8, 9, and 10. We'll play 8 first, which came from Claudia, and then we're going to pause and I'm going to make a brief comment. Then we'll play 9, which came from me, and then 10 from Bob. So Julian, if you please.
Scolori
Now, when Renata was, issues anyone? When Renata was on the stage with me 8 years ago, I decided to play that music. And the cameraman that night, very wisely, only focused his camera, his lens, on Renata. So what you're going to do is hear that aria and her interpretation and her eyes and her face as the performer, and now you're going to hear it as the listener, as the person hearing herself and reacting to what she did.
Scolori
those of you watching on video don't realize that I'm looking at the audience and they're going like this, or this, like this. It reaches that deep. It's Puccini's music, but it's also your performance.
But Puccini gave you a score to read, and everything is written there. Everything. So if you really get the music and read what indication that he gives you, it's impossible to feel it. To feel, of course, you have to read the libretto too, and absorb all the words, understand. Puccini, read about Puccini. Puccini lived with the nuns of clausura, come si dice? Clausura.
The cloistered nuns.
Cloister?
Cloistered nuns, yeah.
Dopo 35 anni ancora non parlo. So, and it tells you the place, the ambient, what happened inside that place. And you have to know and absorb and put it inside. And then you try. And I think is one of the best moments in life as an artist, when you can really have a sort of a second life there. That you become, not that you become another person, but that you are another person controlling. I don't know if, excuse me? I don't.
Channeling,
Channeling?
controlling.
Channeling.
Meglio.
Channeling, non ho mai sentito questo. Channeling. I am Renata, but I'm not Renata. Renata controls Angelica. Yeah, because without control, you cry with a role. You cannot cry. I sang 1,000 Butterfly. If you cry in... Oh. Ok.
No, perché stanno prendendo anche sull'audio.
Ah,
Sì,
ma
sì.
io ho una voce che corre. And so, what I was talking about?
About how Renata controls the performance of Angelica.
It's maybe difficult to understand, but it's really becoming the character. Be the singer. Be on stage, and two people are there, the character and the singer. You're not the singer only, because if you are only the singer, I want to sing very well for you tonight. And this is what I do. I'm a good singer. I'm a fantastic singer. Who cares? You don't cry. You really don't cry. You really don't feel. You really don't laugh. You have to have both.
So, Julian, now, if you would, Bob, very briefly, because we're a little short on time, don't talk about Renata here, but talk about what Angelica is about to experience in this very final scene of the opera Suor Angelica. Because I think one, depending on who's staging it and who's singing it, there are different interpretations. But your view of what happens to Angelica at this moment?
The finale of Suor Angelica actually is and I have to say that when Renata did the Tridico the first time, I did discuss with her Angelica, because it is an opera to me that is quite personal. Angelica has been through learning the death of her child, that she has dedicated the last many years dedicating her pain and her life, her very breath, to the Virgin Mary. And in the finale of Suor Angelica, after she has realized that taking the poison, she will never see her child, because taking your life would mean that you die in peccato mortale, which means you die in mortal sin. And she begs the Madonna. She not only begs the Madonna in that final scene, she commands from the Madonna a miracle of salvation, and she's granted it. And at the very end of the opera, you hear Angelica sigh. Now, that sigh can be interpreted in many ways. For me, it's the transition of Angelica from the physical world to the metaphysical world, and her soul leaving her body and joining her son. And that's what that opera is about. It's about salvation, faith, and truth.
Julian, if you please, play number 10. So, because of time constrictions, I mean, we could stay and do Renata Scotto karaoke the whole night, but but I do want to mention that Bob brought a couple of wonderful clips, so we won't have time, but you can find them on YouTube. Renata and John Vickers as Otello and Desdemona, D.O.T. Giocondi, and he mentioned earlier Don Carlo Tu che le vanità. That's my favorite Verdi soprano aria, so I can listen to anyone sing it, and especially certain artists, among them Renato, who sang it, as you said, with the whole history. To me, it's the Liebestod of Italian opera. It's a reassuming of everything and a distillation of everything, and then she says, "And here I am now." And Renata acted it, sang it beautifully. But Julian, I want you to set up number 15, but before that, Laura wanted to add something.
I was just to paragraph to go along with everything that we've been talking about and listening to. Hello. In reflecting,
You're like your mother.
in reflecting on my childhood and who I am today, I can say that just like you feel on stage, two gifts my mother has given me: strength and vivaciousness. So living life to the fullest and having the strength. As that's two gifts that my mom has given me.
Yeah, sure. Take the mic.
The night that Renata came to dinner with the no garlic, she said, you know, when you know that you've gotten it right and you've really nailed it and you have been the very best you can be, she said, you don't need anybody. But for the rest of the million times, you need your family. So I'm so glad to be with you. Yeah.
So Renata, in another part of my conversation with her, which you can find on Vimeo and YouTube and watch the whole thing, from March of 2015, went on a whole rant about when audiences applaud and don't applaud and how they're applauding at the wrong time, which means they're not listening. And she spoke very passionately. I agree with her completely. And she looked at the audience here and said, don't applaud and don't do this and don't do that. But I wanted to give her a last bit of applause, which I'll let you do in a moment. But I first wanted to mention that my next guest in Adventures in Italian Opera will be February 1st, Maestro Gianandrea Noceda. And he was my first guest when I began this series. We have to look it up, but I think it was 2009. And at that time, people could not pronounce his name. They didn't know his work. Now he's one of the leading conductors in the world. And I'm very happy that he's going to come back here because the first time we didn't record anything. So there's no documentation of my ever having spoken to him. And he was brilliant then and he's more brilliant now. But Julian, I'm going to ask you all to hold your applause and just play quickly number 15.
May applaud. Thank you very much.
Oh, yes. Lovely. Grazie. Oh, thank you. How beautiful. How beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you too.